Hi everyone, welcome to the at panel the at Scale conference today. My name is Sarah Wong. I am a software engineer at Meta for almost 10 years. I built a collection of 0 to 1 product, and today I have the pleasure to have three panelists to join us to discuss the good, the bad, and the glory of building product at scale. With that, I want to introduce Xiao Li. Xiao is the currently leading the engineering team on Instagram Small Business and Commerce Product Group. She has been at Meta for almost 10 years. And prior to that, she was in Microsoft Research for a few years as well. And now next on our panel is Boulos Harb, and he is currently leading engineering at Level, and it is a fintech company. And before that, he has spent almost 14 years at Google, and he was founder of the speech search services in Google. And the next panels we have is Daniel Jacobson. He's a seasoned product manager at Google currently and built a lot of developer tools. And thank you for joining us on this panel. And we're really excited for you to be on the panel. So welcome. To kickstart our panel, we'd like to talk about some of the success story on building 0 to 1 product or platform. So yeah, Boulos, do you want to kickstart the conversation here?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me here. So one of the most memorable 0 to 1 success stories is building voice search at Google. So I had just started at Google. It was 2007, working in New York office as a research department on the speech team. And at the time, we had a service, if you all remember, there's a service called 1-800 Google Forward 1. And the way it worked is users would call in, dialogue system would pick up, ask for the state, then for the city, and then for the place name, and then would connect you to the place. For my first main project on the team, I was asked if I can build a language model over the whole query stream. The idea there was we wanted users to speak more naturally to the system. Just to give some context, this is a time when the first iPhone had just launched, I believe around like mid-2000, 2007. So we built the first language model. We connected it to the Google Form 1 phonetic model on a test server. And the first call to voice search was from a landline. We saw the query appear on the screen. I don't remember what that first query was, but I do remember a handful of us kind of like jumping up and down in exhilaration. That was the birth of voice search. It's funny as we launched it initially on the iPhone, even though we couldn't launch it on the first Android phone. If you remember, that's the G1 flip phone. And the reason is the microphone wasn't good enough for recognition at the time. Now, of course, it's on every phone.
That's really awesome. I think I can relate like the excitement when you see the first people come in and use the product. That I felt like the first transaction when I go back in marketplace, I see the first transaction come in. Charlie, do you want to talk about your experience as well?
Yeah, sure. I love to share some experience building Instagram shopping, which was a project we started a couple of years ago. The motivation of building a shopping product is we know many people come to Instagram to discover businesses and products. And to some extent, Instagram is serving as like a top of the funnel for their shopping journey. But then we observe they often go to the merchant's website to do more research on like ratings and reviews and product details, and then doing transaction there. And so the motivation of like building a shopping product is like, can we help people complete their shopping journey on Instagram? And a couple of years ago when we started this project, we only worked with like 20 handpicked merchants. And now, today we have over 1 million, right, sellers having like the native storefront on Instagram, and hundreds of millions of people have visited their shops. So it's definitely like a really amazing experience seeing this build up from 0 to 1.
That's really awesome, and I can totally relate because my background was I was working on marketplace, so I was really excited to see it launch on Instagram shopping. Daniel, I know you have more like a platform background, but would like to still want to hear like what is the challenge from 0 to 1 on more like a platform pieces or product. So I want to hear from you as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I worked on back in 2014 is the initial launch of the Universal Windows platform for Windows 10. So before Google, I was at Microsoft for about 7 years. And it was really an interesting challenge in the sense that we were building the operating system, apps that ran on the operating system, the app platform, and all of the tools all at the same time. And so you have kind of these app teams that are trying to build something that maybe the APIs don't even exist yet, and you kind of have to go back and forth to iterate with apps and different requirements and things like that. And it was really a kind of interesting and unique experience, especially as kind of the first cross-device app platform or cross-form factor app platform where apps ran on desktop, Windows Phone at the time. There was like a Windows 10 IoT product, Xbox, and HoloLens, and trying to think about like different app requirements for different users, both kind of first-party app teams at Microsoft as well as kind of closely held third-party partners, all coming together at the same time. And ultimately, it was successful in a sense that Windows 10 became the fastest growing operating system ever released by Microsoft, in large parts due to some of the application experiences that were enabled in Windows 10 and kind of some of the built-in experiences. So it was a really kind of compelling experience. And it was an interesting learning too, just dealing with so many different stakeholders, whether it's OS engineers building Windows versus app engineers versus third-party developers, our own tools team, etc. So that was kind of a unique thing that was fun to work on, I guess.
Thank you, Daniel. Super awesome. Yeah, I think now we're going to go to the second question. We talk about a success story. So we want to talk about what are the learning, any epic failure, I would say, that you have encountered while you're building 0 to 1. I think it's always good to see the good and the bad. Xiao, I think I want to start with you. What are some of the epic failure experience, and then what are your experience on that, and what do you learn from it?
Yeah, the example I like to share today is, I could call it epic failure or it's like a great learning experience. That was the project when I first joined Meta, and back then it was Facebook. We were building this like really ambitious, graph search engine for Facebook. So the idea is like, Facebook graph is very structured, right? And, what if we could query the Facebook graph asking questions like, my friends who live in California and who work at Facebook, or like, restaurants liked by people from Japan. And this is a really cool way of getting the information, where the structure and express it in a very intuitive way. So we spent a lot of effort really design the technical architecture of this system. You can imagine a lot of technical challenges at the Facebook scale. But what we missed early on is like really implement this like logging system so we can get early data usage insights, right, really early on. So once we build this like polish like the the engine, really focus on the technical accuracy of it, we start to see, oh, the usage actually is very centered around a small number of power users. And for the vast majority of people, they don't really get how to use it, right? And so we start to pivot and like eventually wind down this project. But I think it's like a great learning experience on getting that user study either from research or early data analytics is like extremely critical and powerful.
Thank you, Xiao. I think that is speak to a lot of like experience that I have as well. Daniel, do you have anything to share about what we call epic failure? Okay.
Yeah, and I think mine is actually very related to Xiao's story as well, where it's about understanding kind of who are the target users or who is the demographic of users for your product or platform. And so I'm actually going to cheat and reuse my first example too, which is the Universal Windows platform. So in many ways, it was successful in that it unblocked and enabled these kind of new and novel experiences on Windows. But we kind of entered this thing with the widely held assumption that, hey, existing Windows developers, of which there are many, are going to kind of move to this new platform. It's our latest and greatest technology. We have all sorts of new things for them, without really deeply understanding some of their use cases and why there were so many Windows developers to begin with. And so the kind of the failure aspect is that since it was built for mobile platforms and non just desktop platforms, there were inherently some constraints that didn't previously exist in some of the more popular desktop frameworks on Windows. Like you have battery management, so you have task management, and you have kind of this new application sandbox expectation for security and privacy that is just a widely held expectation on mobile devices that whereas desktops were typically more capable and you could do more things like that. And so the other kind of aspect of that was we didn't make it as easy as we could have to bring existing code forwards. And so basically what that created was a choice for existing Windows developers when they were faced with a time when they were thinking about rewriting their application or doing a major reinvestment in existing applications. It's, do I want to try to bring it forwards to this new platform that for all intents and purposes requires a major rewrite, or should I target a different or competing platform? And so the value prospect of Universal Windows Platform was you can target all these different device families, but for many applications, they didn't care. They just wanted it to run really well on Windows Desktop. They didn't need an Xbox app. They didn't need a Windows Phone app. And so in that case, a lot of times they might have chosen something differently. And so I think the big takeaway, the big learning was really understanding your existing customer base. If you're going to have an expectation that, yes, you want them to move forward, what do they need and what would actually incentivize them to move forward in terms of improvements to their platform. And I think kind of a different approach we could have done was more aggressively scoping to like, this is specifically who this is for. We're not necessarily going to go after all these existing Windows developers. And we actually did kind of iterate and change our platform approach a little bit later on. Most .NET Windows developers were building on WPF and still Windows Forms to this day. And ultimately, we made the decision to open source those frameworks and build them on top of .NET Core, which was our latest .NET runtime. And that way, we were serving different customers with different requirements with different platform choices, rather than just trying to shoehorn everybody into this like, okay, here's our one forward-looking solution that's for everyone. That doesn't always work. So that was kind of the failed experience. But it's hard to call it a failure because, on the other hand, like it did unblock a certain type of application that was unique and that did make Windows super successful. It just didn't kind of live up to the expectations we went into it with.
That's totally rationally relayed. Boulos, you want to share your experience and story on this?
Yeah, many failures along the way, but I'd say the epic failure is a product we launched called Table Search. So this was 2009. We had a research project where we were extracting HTML tables from the web. We were sitting on this amazing corpus of table data and wanted to make it accessible and useful. But one issue was adding this feature to Google Search did not make sense at the time from a product perspective. So we decided to build a separate search service that only returns tables. So we called this service Table Search. Remember, again, this is 2009, right? And this entailed bringing up search infrastructure, including processing pipeline, new indexing, and solving very interesting technical problems. For example, how do you snippet or preview a table? We create an algorithm that uses the query and the page to like compute the most relevant subtable of the given table to represent as a representative snippet. We even had affordances that expanded the table in place to show more of the content and so on. But the product ended up being very niche. It was used by journalists, but didn't have the adoption needed to keep it running or integrate it into Google Search as a vertical, for example. And so here's a very similar theme. Like one of the biggest learnings I had from this experience is how critical it is to understand the user needs rather than build a product around a tech or just because there are interesting problems to solve. And Maria actually talked about this this morning, to lead with people first product development. Anyway, to wrap up the story, fast forward 9 years later, we saw the need to surface table previews in Google search results because sometimes that is the best representation of the underlying page. And that helps users in their journey to find the information they're looking for as fast as possible. And here, given the earlier work, we were able to experiment and launch this feature quickly as part of Google Search. So you search for something like F1 schedules, and you'll see it trigger.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think this is our important journey that we need to know how to get a product 0 to 1 before we take it to scale. So given all your experience that you had so far, what would you say are one of the top 1 or 2 key indicators that you think is leading to a success to a 0 to 1 product? Daniel, why don't you start first? I want to hear what's your thought based on your experience so far.
Yeah, and I'm noticing a theme with all of the existing responses so far, which is really people first, products development. I think Boulos said it better than I could have. Where it's deeply understanding who is the expected user of your product, and are you actually solving a problem for them? And I think a couple of key indicators that would lead to the success of a kind of the 0 to 1 product launch is product market fit, meaning like, are you filling a need that exists today? Are users trying to solve this problem that they have in other ways? Are they looking for workarounds? Are they trying to hack around your product to solve a problem that you can actually just offer to them as a solution? I think that's a huge indicator that, like, yeah, you're actually solving a real problem, and this is going to satisfy a need and scale well. And understanding, like, is that a broadly experienced problem, or is it just kind of the power users? Going back to Xiao's example. And then I think another key indicator for success is more traditional, like customer love metrics. Like, not only are you building a product that is useful, but do customers actually love the experience? Are they willing to go out of their way to recommend it? And I think a lot of product managers use NPS as kind of a signal for, okay, this is something that is really finding a niche and something that customers really, really like and love to the point where they would recommend it. Things like that. So those are some indicators that I've used in the past that have really helped kind of determine, are we onto something, or is this just going to kind of flop?
Yeah, I have to echo. I think back to my experience with marketplace, because people were hacking and trying to buy and selling on the groups, and that's why the buy sell groups are launched, and and that marketplace. Xiao, was this your thought on the indicator, if it is similar?
Yeah, what Daniel said really resonates. I think the two indicators on my mind. One is for the users who use your product, there's the stickiness, right? Or we call it the retention. In many companies, they want to come back and reuse it, right? That's the really clear indicator that the product works. And the second thing is, like, among the people in the cohort, you feel that's the addressable market. Is there organic growth, right? Is there more people who want to adopt this? And it doesn't have to be all the users in the world, right? I think based on your, what audience your product is targeting, but the kind of organic growth of, like, without artificial boost or growth, people want to come and try out. That's another indicator.
That's awesome. Boulos, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I think that is really a key indicator, which is, like, if I were to restate it, people using the product in ways that we as builders and designers had not really anticipated. An example here is like follow-up questions in voice search. So we saw users asking whether in New York, and then following up, what about Boston? The system didn't know what to do, but we implemented this understanding as a result and experimented with it and launched it. Then team continued experimenting and launching sort of like in that space of contextual queries. These are really strong indicators of user need and provide this like natural direction for future development. They also give us a set of use cases to experiment with to take the product to the next level. This kind of leads to the other success ingredient that I want to mention, which Ime stressed in his keynote this morning. Having that framework and commitment to run many A/B experiments, iterate quickly, is critical for the success and adoption of the product. This helps us decide what to launch more concretely, sort of like understand what are the features that are most useful for users.
I can only relate because, yes, in Meta we run a lot of experiment right here. So I think we talk the first half we talk a lot about what are the success ingredients to take a product from 0 to 1. So launching, yay, we launched the product. And then what will be, you would say, taking now, because of the at scale conference scheme, we need to take the product beyond the one phase. Is where actually sometimes it get a little tricky. What are some of, like, I would say you're able to take it to the immediate step right after the launch? How do you determine if this is ready to be scaled or need to be shut down? Like, do you want to talk a little bit about the challenge on that? I think, Xiao, we want to start on that one.
Yeah, there are both like product challenges and engineering challenges when we want to scale the product right beyond 0 to 1. For the Instagram shopping example I just mentioned earlier, if we want to onboard more sellers, right? You can imagine the large businesses have more resources compared with like small businesses, right? For small sellers, they won't have as like need a more as sophisticated tool as the large businesses. So we may want to have simpler interfaces for them. And similarly, in different markets, right, the people respond to the product in different ways. And there's also like local policies and regulation we need to consider. And on the engineering side, one thing we start to observe once like the product started to kick off is we there's like more QPS to the system, and you can imagine it's gonna have you're gonna have to prepare more capacity. And because when we start as a 0 to 1 stage, you can afford to, let's say, cache some of the results for every single person. But once you have more users, you cannot afford to do that. Then you start to see latency issues, right? If you now cannot do cache, you have to query like backend every time, and then the product becomes slow. So you have to tackle new challenges. So these are all kind of examples of like once you get to the product off the ground, you will experience a lot of both like product and infrastructure challenges you wouldn't experience before.
Boulos, want to add any more on top of this?
Yeah, I think surfacing, like we had a project where we're surfacing facts in web result previews in search, is one example where there was a clear challenge between going from 0 to 1 to the 1 to n phase. The idea is that if a result contains facts, we wanted to surface these facts in the results preview on the search result page. For 0 to 1, we took the happy path, right? In the first iteration, we started with parsing Wikipedia pages, and we launched these facts only on Wikipedia results. Then the quality uphill began. Even if we just look at parsing attribute value structures, Wikipedia has very structured templates, making it easy to extract these facts. But when you go to other sites, these attribute value structures can take on various formats. So we didn't just go from like 0 to 1 to 1 to n, where we start extracting from every site. We went from 0 to 1 to 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, and so on until we covered until we had like full site coverage over the web. And to get there, we no longer could just simply parse templates. We needed to build sophisticated ML models to allow us to distinguish between structures that contain facts and those that don't. Of course, other engineering challenges cropped up, like, and Xiao mentioned them, like capacity constraints, freshness. Running jobs on the set of Wikipedia pages is much easier than running it on the whole web.
Yeah, I also can relate that. Like, so speaking from the marketplace experience, that like we also focus on the happy path when we first launch, and then we weren't expecting people are posting or selling all kind of things that we weren't expecting, like services or illegal items or like animals. So like that was kind of totally surprised when we first launched, and we take a few months afterward to really clean up to make it ready for the next phase of scaling. So yeah, totally relate. Awesome. So I think the next question I have is like, we talk about 0 to 1 and 1 to n. How will you balance like a product to be like to be able to be in a scalable fashion, but at the same time be mindful about the time to market, because they always are in conflict with each other. Because if you build scalable, you might take longer to be market, but if you build too fast, you might not be able to pass through the 1 to n phase. Like, what measure are you taking to making sure you're not building a one-way door? Daniel, we want to start on this.
Sure. I think some of the things that Boulos called out in his last example actually resonate here as well, which is like trying to anticipate or predict some of the non-happy path scenarios that you might encounter as you go, so you can kind of bake those into your schedule. So like if you're building a prototype, a lot of times prototypes are very much like, oh, here's this really easy, well-constrained path that I can do. And then you show that to execs or leadership sometimes, and they're like, when can we ship it? And then it's like, oh, but there's all these other things we need to do. So I think one example is setting expectations and anticipating potential risks or kind of edge cases or bounds that are going to kind of cause issues. But then on the other hand of it is aggressively scoping your product early on, so that maybe the happy path is the right approach because it actually does solve a problem just by being constrained to that happy path. Like if it's useful and it can be usable independently, even though it might be the happy path, that might actually be okay to get going. I think the other things that really help is trying to identify potential early customers of your product, whether it's through private previews or closed betas or things like that. But then this goes back to some of the previous questions, which is making sure it's a representative group of customers. So I think Xiao's example is really great. Like, don't only target power users for your product that might only be useful to power users. If that's not going to bring out long-term business success, like make sure that you are getting a broad spectrum of potential early adopters of your product. And then one of the other things that we found useful in the past too is like create communities of open communication or open channels of communication. So as you are adding new features, as you are building out this product, you can easily identify usability issues early on. Or you can maybe find out maybe this actually isn't the right product to solve this problem. Maybe we kind of pivot or do something completely different. I think one risk is kind of releasing an entire massive scale product all at once and opening the floodgates and realizing the infrastructure isn't set up properly, things are going to break. It's not actually solving the problem you set out to solve. Maybe it is solving the problem, but the users you thought it was going to solve it for aren't. Yeah, so I think it goes back to Boulos said too, like making sure you have the infrastructure to do A/B testing and kind of early experimentation and iterate based off of the results of that experimentation. Like all of these things are kind of a necessity as you kind of go out the product development life cycle, I guess.
Boulos, any more thought about this not building one way door and making sure you have the right time to market? I think yes, very tricky question. So curious.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes is after building the 1.0, immediately building the 2.0. Right. So in any big project, when launching from 0 to 1, there are inevitably corners that are cut, parts of the product that are not fully thought out. And while the team is taking the time to build version 2 without rolling out incremental enhancements, users don't see any updates for 6 months or sometimes a year, right? And during this period, users see no growth, no apparent investment in the product. You're also unable to respond to user pain points. So the time to build 2.0 is when your user base has plateaued, after you've satisfied your initial users with incremental releases and grown that initial user base. We've also found that that's a good time. That's a good time to build 2.0 to expand the offering, add missing feature, and acquire that like next wave of users.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost like making sure the product are still have incremental features while we are like cleaning up some of the early shortcut or corner that we cut and making sure we have a more sustainable infrastructure moving forward. Xiao, do you have any more thing to add if you're on this question?
Yeah, I think my learnings are pretty consistent with the other speakers. For Instagram shopping tab, it reminds me our first version was like as simple as we just pull the Instagram, there's like the media, the photos, right? And the photos with the product tags, we just put them into a tab and like, of course, adding some like ranking on top of it. But the long term, like the goal is really you can recommend products directly, right? So clearly the version 1.0 is not going to be scalable. This is more test the market and to see if there's like enough promise to get to 2.0. So in the next version, we completely revamp the infrastructure, right? Build a like product recommendation system from scratch rather than doing the hacky way. And then the product starts to kick off.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all this good lesson and learning for our audience here. And I can only resonate in how we are building product and how to take it to scale for this theme. So I would say this concludes our first panel for this morning session. We are going to take a short break and we are going to return to the afternoon session. So thanks everyone for joining the session and thanks so much for our panelists to be part of it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. See you.